Hello and welcome back to another episode of App Stories. This episode is brought to you by none other than Vitally. I am John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. Hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am feeling relaxed after the weekend. We're recording this on
same.
Monday, and it's. I think it's gonna be a busy week. I feel like by the time this episode comes out for members, maybe we will have a WWDC announcement, or maybe not. But when we're recording this, there's no way to know. So we'll see.
There is no way to know. Yeah. And people, by the time this comes out, people will know that we have updated our setups too on the website. So go check out macstories.net /setups because Federico and I try to update our setups, like 4 times a year, roughly, once a quarter.
Yeah, once a quarter, more or less.
More or less. And it's just, if you're interested at all in the kind of gear that we use for the various things that we do, it's a good way to do that. So check that out on the site. But today's topic is not gear. Today's topic is OpenClaw, but by Apple. All right.
Good luck.
This is imagining a world where Apple did something similar to OpenClaw. And I think before we even get into the depths of this, I think we really kind of need to set out what the big deal is about some of this agentic stuff, because I feel like, there are a lot of people who have not tried OpenClaw. I've tried it and abandoned it and have moved on to something different, similar to what you're doing, which we'll get to in a bit. But I feel like a lot of people saw the hype around it, but also saw a lot of the security warnings and rightfully said, I don't want to mess with that. I could probably figure it out for myself, but I don't have the time or the energy to do that. And so I think that there's still a lot of people who are using ChatGPT or Claude, and what they're doing is they're mostly using the chatbot still. And so I think it kind of helps to set the stage to talk a little bit about what our experiences have been with using agents, because it really is different than where you would be if you were still just using a chatbot. I still use a chatbot. It's just that this agentic stuff is kind of next level in terms of the things you can accomplish.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially over the past week with some of the changes that Anthropic has announced in Claude, and I think I've landed on this answer, like what's the difference between a chatbot and an agent? And so I think the chatbot is, it's right there. It's the place for chats, for like answers and questions and the back and forth. But chatbots, they have a different hardness. So when you hear the word hardness, it means like the way that the model, underneath there's always a model. There's always a large language model, right? The hardness is what these companies like OpenAI and Anthropic refer to as the very basic instructions at the core of the product. And like the template that the model is supposed to follow when it's in the context of a chatbot, or whether it's in the context of an agent like Cloud Code, for example, or Cowork. And so the chatbot has these instructions that by default, no matter how hard you try, from my experience, chatbots never work as long as agents do. Like even when you set them to work on a long task, like, hey, I want you to analyze, my 3 months worth of email. The way that the chatbot experience is designed, it's not going to work for like 30 or 40 minutes unless you kick off like a deep research, or unless you use OpenAI, ChatGPT Pro. Those are separate experiences.
They are, and a lot of times those longer sessions where you do that kind of thing involve using MCP, where you're involving other tools in the process. I personally think of the chatbot experience is a lot closer to doing a Google search. I think it was designed in that way as almost like a replacement for that. It's evolved from there. It's no longer just answers to questions, as you said. It can do things.
It can do things, and it can work sort of independently for a while. But even if you kick off the same task, and you can run this experiment if you don't believe me, put together a question that involves, multi-step research or taking actions in, in your Gmail, in your Google Calendar, and then cross-referencing maybe their information with the web or with stuff that you keep in Notion. And try the same question, try the same request, both in a Claude regular chat versus Cloud Code or Cloud Cowork, you will see two very different experiences. I am willing to bet that the Claude chat, the chatbot, will finish earlier, and maybe it will even run out of context for the conversation, whereas the agent in Cowork or in Cloud Code will keep working on it. And it'll work in isolation, independently. Maybe it'll use sub-agents. And it'll work for 20, 30, 40 minutes. It'll work for an hour. And you will see, this parallel tool calling. It'll kick off the Gmail integration on one side and the Notion integration on the other. Some web searches on the other side. Like, it'll parallelize operations a lot more. It'll use tools a lot more. It'll use sub-agents so that it will not pollute the context of the main session. It's a lot more optimized for working on its own for a while, using multiple tools, often in parallel, whereas the chatbot experience, as much as it's been improved over the past year with, external tools and connectors and all those things, it's still primarily designed to have a shorter context a smaller context window, and for back and forth, for chats, not for you to ask a question and then leave for 45 minutes and then come back and find an answer. Like, it's a very different type of experience.
Right. No, yeah, and that's kind of how I use it. I use it it's that conversational stuff where you might have follow-up questions, and often it's very much a one-off question. It's just like a starting place. Although I will say that it does work well alongside things like Claude Code and Cowork, in that you can kind of some initial exploration of an issue, kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, well, I really want to do something with this information that I've gathered. Have Claude, the chatbot, create a report from that, just like a markdown file or something, and then bring that over to something like Cowork or Claude Code or whatever it is, and use that as your jumping off point, because the chatbot is also, where you can still do things like projects, where you can, do things like have it help you create prompts, because you can, one of the projects that I know you and I both have used, I don't use it for every project, but if I have a really complicated project, I often will use a project that is for creating prompts, and that creates prompts. It's got references to the Anthropic help documentation for how to structure a prompt with XML to make it easier for the LLM to understand and follow the instructions. So, even though it is a shorter context window and more of a conversational short-term thing, it is a good jumping off point a lot of the times, I think, for the ultimate tool you might use after it.
Yeah.
This episode of AppStories is brought to you by our friends at Vitally, the AI-powered workspace for customer success managers. Vitali's purpose-built AI is for scaled customer success. It's there to help you better understand customers, to reduce churn, unlock growth, and always stay a step ahead. Basically all the things that make you great at your job. Vitally delivers the clarity, automation, and AI-driven insights your team needs, so you can move faster, stay aligned, and drive customer outcomes at scale. Vitally AI surfaces insights from every customer interaction to unlock another level of CS productivity, visibility, and collaboration. It's why Vitally is trusted by more than 600 leading B2B SaaS customer success teams. And how is this for a great offer? Vitally is offering a free pair of AirPods Pro for every AppStories listener who takes a qualified demo call. So if you're a customer success decision maker, schedule your call by visiting vitally.io/AppStories. Again, that's vitally.io/AppStories for a free pair of AirPods Pro when you take a qualified demo. Our thanks to Vitally for their support of AppStories.
And since this episode is about the idea of an OpenClaw for, made by Apple or for Apple platforms, you don't need to use OpenClaw if you want to get a taste of what an experience like OpenClaw is like. Because
Exactly.
it can be, it can be a little confusing. It can be a little overwhelming to set up OpenClaw from scratch. And obviously, I mean, the first place to start, I think, would be the Claude app on your Mac and using Cowork or using Dispatch, which is a feature that requires the Claude for Mac application to be running on a Mac, but you connect via Dispatch from your iPhone or from your iPad. Both features, all of this is based on Cowork. Cowork itself is a more visual flavor of Cloud Code. Cowork is basically Cloud Code for people who don't want to code. It's based, I believe it's the same harness or very similar to Cloud Code. It's built for agentic work. So it's built for doing things in the background, for working independently, for using multiple tools, for working with folders on your computer. And that's when people gush over OpenClaw. I mean, I did it. I do it because I really think this is the future of using AI for productivity work. But this is what they mean. Like you can ask a question, and it's not just about the AI going on the web and searching for an answer and then coming back to you. It's about the AI actually doing work, and so actually using multiple tools. Like a person would have one window for Notion, another window for their email, and then maybe a calendar. And so these agents can also use all these integrations in parallel, and they can do things. They can, just today, for example, I use Claude Cowork on the Mac to analyze 3 months worth of conversations in our Slack with our web developer, finding all the things that we said, oh, we should work on these at some point, like finding all those items, cross-referencing them against the items that our developer kept track of in a Notion database, finding the missing pieces, like the things that we said, oh, we should do this, but we actually never did them, and compiling a list for those things that I can then, I'm supposed to discuss with you, John, at some point. So that's the kind of experience that these things can do. If you don't want to use Claude, you can, I would say you should check out Perplexity Computer.
That's a good point.
Which is another of these agents alternatives. And again, that's a pretty also like proving exactly what we were discussing. Like Perplexity now literally has 2 tabs where you can ask or you can go to computer, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Like ask is the chatbot, computer is the agent doing things.
And we're not talking about OpenAI a lot here because they really haven't gotten into this nearly as much as Anthropic and Perplexity, although they do have an agentic tool, which is Codex, which is for developers, largely for making code. You can use it for other things, but it really is, as we talked about recently on the show, it really is designed to be for developers more than anything else. And I don't know, Federico, have you used Codex at all for things that are kind of non-scripting or non-coding?
I have tried. It's really not that good for that because one of the differences between there are then the differences between agents, right? And even if Codex is an agent, but it's a kind of coding agent that is designed for reading documentation about a code base up front and then executing on changes that you want to make to that code. And if you try and use Codex for non-coding things, that part of its nature still kicks in. So I tried, for example, to use Codex for task management with the Todoist MCP, and it thought about Todoist and read my entire Todoist account up front for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Probably looked at all of your completed tasks and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, that kind of thing makes sense for a code base. So even though these agents can have the same harness, but then you got to optimize them for productivity, which is exactly what Anthropic is doing with Cowork. While still keeping Claude Code for programmers, right? And so, I have tried to use Codex for non-coding things, and it's not nice. But now, technically, they have Peter Steinberger from, the creator of OpenClaw, now works at OpenAI. Now, technically, OpenAI did not purchase OpenClaw. They just hired the creator of OpenClaw. So who knows what that means? And also, there was the report from last week in the Wall Street Journal.
they kind of own it. They put it in a foundation, right?
They put in a foundation.
So I guess they control it in the sense that it's not part of the corporation OpenAI, but it is adjacent to it in a foundation. But I know what you mean. Peter's a smart guy, and they wanted to hire Peter more than anything. I think.
And there was also that report from the Wall Street Journal saying that OpenAI has realized that they haven't done enough for productivity and for the enterprise. And now they want to shift their focus from these experiments like Sora or image generation or, or the browser to a more productive ChatGPT experience. And I mean, duh, right? They realize that there's money to be made in the productivity space and the enterprise space, which is something that Anthropic, I saw they posted a breakdown of the revenue a few days ago. And they showed this graph where 20% of Anthropic's revenue comes from subscriptions, from people subscribing to Claude Pro or to Claude Max, and 80% of the revenue comes from enterprise money.
Wow.
I mean,
I have an aside for you, Federico. I was listening to the Hard Fork podcast over the weekend, and they said that Anthropic had told them that their number one customer, and I believe they're talking about individuals, their number one customer had spent $150,000 in 1 month on Claude tokens. $150,000 in 1 month.
What are they doing?
I don't know. No, because there's this whole thing going around now. This is a whole other topic, but these leaderboards for who's using the most tokens as a way of evaluating employee performance. If you're using a lot of tokens, the notion is that somehow you're more productive, which is, if you've used these things, there's not a lot of correlation there necessarily any more than there is correlating lines of code to productivity. But yeah, there are people out there using lots and lots of tokens, far more than us, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Anything else we should? Oh, I guess I should also mention, if you want to try OpenClaw, but you don't want to set up OpenClaw, and you want something very similar to it, I have been having a really good experience with the new Claude Channels that they announced last week, and it's basically Anthropic building OpenClaw. It's literally Telegram and Discord integration for Claude Code. And I like it so much, John. I mean, there are it's a 1.0. There are many things still to figure out, many missing features compared to OpenClaw. I have stopped using OpenClaw. I have migrated everything to Claude, all my skills, all my automations, like the cron jobs, the scheduled tasks that were running on my Mac Studio server. And I have been using not OpenClaw, but Claude Code in Telegram for the past few days, and it's been quite lovely. And I don't run into, Claude has disconnected from your OpenClaw again, because it's all integrated, it's all native. And I mean, they are copying OpenClaw quite aggressively, but hey, this is what happens with open source projects.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I set it up on Saturday myself. I mean, I essentially had all the pieces in place already, all the kinds of projects and recurring tasks and things that I have Claude already do through scripts and things on my computer. But I didn't have it integrated in that way where things would happen in concert and reports would be sent to me over Telegram. And there is something about having a messaging app to communicate with these chatbots, or with these agents, because it gives you that, it takes you away from your desk, because a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of these tasks, and a lot of mine are Claude Code tasks that really have to happen in the terminal, but now those are happening using tmux in the background. So I have like virtual versions of Claude running on an always on Mac, and I can just communicate with it wherever I am using Telegram, which is just a nice way to kind of get away from dealing with the terminal and being at a desk at a Mac and being able to do these things with a messaging app. So it's just another one of those conveniences and another kind of piece of the puzzle. Because I think what people like, really, it's pretty clear from chatbots that people like to chat with these things. And that's essentially what a messaging app is adding, but to a different flavor of the LLMs that we're talking about, the more code and agentic ones, and they like getting things done quickly, having someone do the boring work. I mean, this is exactly what you and I are doing. We're like delegating a lot of administrative work that we would do and being able to do things that we wouldn't have had time to do if we're just you or me doing it, doing that with things like Claude Code. And that's kind of where I think all this is going.
Yeah. So anyway, all that context up front to say, could Apple even have an OpenClaw alternative?
I think we should imagine it whether they can or not, because I think
realistically, they don't even have a large language model right now. So
there are a lot of pieces in place. But to me, like as I was putting these notes together, the fascinating thing to me about this is that the companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, they came to this party with the large language model, but without the tools.
Yeah.
And Apple is coming to it with the tools, but not the large language model, right?
That is a great point, which is maybe, exactly why Apple realized, a match made in heaven. We should partner up with some of these model providers to fix our AI story on our devices, which, I mean, you summed it up perfectly, John. I think that's why Apple ultimately decided to team up with Google for Gemini, and the next version of Siri will be integrated with Gemini, because at this point they are so far behind making a large language model that it was probably the only way out. But they do have the ecosystem, they do have the tools, they have the apps and the computers that people like to use. So
they just don't have the glue to kind of do what they call in the AI world orchestration.
Orchestration, right. So assuming that this chatbot, new Siri experience rollout goes well and it's powered by Gemini. I should tell you, John, I use Perplexity a lot. And I gotta tell you, I really like using Gemini 3.1 Pro in Perplexity.
Interesting.
I never use Gemini. I never go to gemini.google.com. I never
don't
use
anymore either, even though I subscribe still.
Gemini in Perplexity is very good because it searches the web a lot. It has access to YouTube. I think by default, since it's Gemini, so made by Google, it has access to more sources, and it thinks a lot, it reasons a lot, and it doesn't sugarcoat things. Gemini 3.1 Pro in Perplexity is very good. And I think that would be an example of what you can expect from Gemini inside something else, right? Gemini inside Siri, for example.
It's interesting because, Google does have a better world knowledge, primarily because they don't let you block Gemini without also losing access to Google search. And that's a whole political ball of wax. But I mean, that's I think the reason it is that you can't shut down Gemini as a publisher without also cutting yourself off from Google searches, which I think, despite the decline in Google searches, very few publishers are willing to do. And I have noticed a lot of publishers are blocking LLMs these days. Yeah. Still, they're cutting one-off deals with them, trying to at least.
Yeah, trying to. So
let's dig into it, Federico.
I guess assuming that a chatbot, that Siri powered by Gemini goes well. So first thing, the first obvious part for me would be to have a Siri app, like a place where it's not just ephemeral voice questions to your assistant on your phone, but there's an app where you can have a chatbot experience, where you can pick up a previous conversation, where maybe you can organize those conversations by folder. I don't think Apple would call them projects because, Apple does make productivity apps, but I think, they also want to design something for the masses, and the masses understand folders. So I think, a place where you can organize your chats by folder. So I think for Apple after this first step, Gemini in Siri, a new AI story, a Siri app in iOS 27. Let's imagine like an OpenClaw made by Apple. I think it's still going to be Siri, right? And I think they would probably pitch it as, now you have a Siri agent on your device that can use the same advanced Apple intelligence of your main Siri, conversations. But this
Right.
time we optimize it for getting work done on your devices. I'm trying to just imagine a product.
So if you were Apple, would you put that in your imaginary Siri app where you have where you
Yeah,
have basically the
yeah.
chat?
I would do something like Perplexity where you have tabs. I mean, even
Yeah.
Anthropic is doing. They have Claude, they have Cowork, and they have Code.
Sure.
I would do Siri, world knowledge like questions and answers, and
What
I would
about
do.
shortcuts though?
So here's what I think. I don't think people would open the Shortcuts app. I think I would use the Shortcuts app as the. Okay, here's a hot take. I could see the Shortcuts app potentially going away even eventually if this is all successful and sort of being
It
rolled.
just becomes the back end, and it's no
Just
longer a
becomes the back end.
user-facing thing.
Yeah, it just becomes the back end. And I could see a section of the Siri app that is called Siri Agent or I don't know. Hey,
Siri Shortcuts.
Siri Shortcuts is right there. Once again,
Finally becomes meaningful.
obviously we activated Siri somewhere. So there's that. More details on apple.com as always. No, but I could see a section there where it's more work oriented. And so
Yeah.
a place where Siri can give you a UI, because I do think that if Apple gets into this space, it'll be very visual as an experience. So you can
it'll be for sending your invites out, through the invites app.
No, but I mean, they'll show you all the apps you have installed.
Yeah, I know.
And maybe they'll let you do. I can imagine a hybrid of Perplexity Computer and Claude Cowork more than OpenClaw itself. A place where you can set up your projects, and a project maybe involves some documents or maybe a folder in the Files app. And maybe you can say, oh, I want to work with these and these apps. And so you pick and choose like Fantastical, and you choose some of the actions.
Mm-hmm.
There are permission prompts. Like I can see Apple fully embracing, the Shortcuts backend, but in a visual way that is more similar to these products like Claude Cowork and Perplexity Computer, right?
Yeah, I would hope too that in that scenario, what Apple would do is those permission prompts would be part of the setup process of whatever you're trying to do, as opposed to being a runtime thing. Because that's one of the problems with shortcuts is that they interrupt what you're doing. And it would be nice to be able to just kind of go through the UI and do those permissions as you go, as you're working on the project and setting it up at the front end. But
yeah, and look, maybe Apple doesn't think that it's necessary to split these two experiences between chatbot and agent. Maybe they think, no, we're just gonna roll it all into the main Siri app. But the idea, I think, will be the same, that they should be tapping into the potential of their App Intents ecosystem, the fact that App Intents can already show you UI in the form of widgets, in the form of snippets. And I think, I could see a scenario where in iOS 28, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to get 27 this year. It's going to have Gemini, Siri, and the new Siri app. And I could see in 2027 for iOS 28, Siri becoming more productivity oriented for things like this. And I guess what I'm imagining is I wanted to say something and then I thought about it and then I changed my mind. I could also see, and maybe this is the most obvious answer of them all, I could also see Apple building an OpenClaw adjacent product in iMessage, with Siri in iMessage. Because maybe they think, oh, the reason why these products like OpenClaw are so popular is that people are using their messaging apps of choice. And I could see Apple saying, well, now you can also have, they wouldn't call it Siri Claw, obviously, but now you can also iMessage Siri in iMessage to get things done more quickly. I could also see that.
Yeah, I could too. I one of the things that I think is interesting from Apple's perspective is that when you think about what Anthropic and Perplexity are doing, for them to be on mobile, they need to have apps that are tapping back either to the cloud or to your desktop computer. And I would think it would be interesting to see what Apple could do both for a combination of on-device models for simple tasks and then private cloud compute or wherever Gemini happens to be, running, whether it's on Google's servers or Apple's. and orchestrating from the cloud and with a piece of it on device so that you could do things a lot more directly on your iPhone without having to worry about running, like right now you have to worry about, oh, I got to remember to keep Claude open on my Mac and running so that I can use dispatch or, all that. Or the same is true with Perplexity, isn't it? I think with computer, with personal computer is going to do the same thing. So to me, there's an advantage there. Now, obviously there's like a lot of considerations of things like battery life and all that. But I do think that Apple has done a very good job with things like handoff and all the continuity features where these devices have a certain amount of awareness of each other. And it seems to me that if you have multiple devices in your life, an iPad, an iPhone, maybe a laptop, and you have even things like AppNap where apps are doing certain tasks, even when your laptop is closed, that they could come up with a system to distribute this work, this agentic work across devices, even locally, depending on, what's the battery life, what type of Wi-Fi network are they on? Do they have to pass off to the cloud to do real heavy lifting? And orchestrate that together, not just from orchestrating tools, software tools, but orchestrating hardware too, which could really, really be a differentiator if Apple could get to it. But I mean, that's many steps down the road from where we are today or where we'll be even in the next, I think, 2 years.
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I really don't know. Obviously the point of the episode was to imagine this product, and I think we imagined it. I think, I think Apple, the other thing I wanted to stress, I think they have the potential to make this kind of experience so much more user-friendly, right?
Yes.
Than it currently is, especially because these apps would be running on your device. So like you mentioned, there would be a privacy angle that's quite important. It would mean that you would have proper user interfaces for all of these apps, thanks to the work that's already been done with widgets and snippets in app intents. But it's a lot of work to get this orchestration done right, and you got to start in a much, much simpler fashion.
Yeah, because in a way, it's its own operating system when you think about it.
Yeah.
It kind of is. It's like a whole new layer of the OS that has to span a whole bunch of different kinds of devices.
Yeah. And I talked about a Siri app. I wouldn't discount the potential for iMessage integration. I would also think about that. I don't think it's a silly idea.
Yeah.
But the other thing is we're imagining OpenClaw made by Apple now, and we don't even have a basic chatbot on iOS. Who knows what the market is going to be like a year from now?
Yeah.
We don't even know what the market is going to be a month from now. So
yeah. No, and look, and developers don't even have access to private cloud compute.
So
they've got a 4,000 token context window still on device, and that's just downright primitive in today's day and age, unfortunately. I mean, maybe we'll see a lot at WWDC this year, but the catching up has never been. I feel like Apple is catching up, but they're catching up too slowly.
Yeah.
So
we'll see, but it's fun to imagine things. So
it is fun, and I think, look, it really is. With it, it's the age-old reality with Apple is that the coordination of both hardware and software together, that's a powerful mix that by controlling that whole stack, you could do things that right now are maybe a little clunky and workaroundy for the likes of Anthropic and Perplexity and OpenAI, but Apple could do it. It's just they need to get the last piece. The big piece is the LLM piece, and so we'll see how all that goes. All right, Federico. Well, great conversation. We've got some stuff to talk about in the post show. I want to talk about where AI ranks in your mind and in kind of the lifetime of technology changes that we've seen. So we'll talk about that in the post show. In the meantime, you can find me and Federico at macstories.net. And we are also, of course, writing for Club Mac Stories, which is baked right into macstories.net these days. Check it out. If you haven't ever checked out the club, just go there and, poke around a little bit. You can see some of what we're writing about because we've got the first parts of that paywalled stuff up there, visible for everybody to look at for each article. And we'll be back in another week. You can find us on social media too, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.